Welcome everyone to this session of PD in your PJs. We are thrilled to have you here with us today, joining us to learn more about how older students are using Seesaw. And I'm thrilled to have an amazing presenter here with us today. Sabba Quidwai is with us, and she works in higher education at the University of Southern California in the Keck School of Medicine, the Division of Physician Assistant Studies. They do have one-to-one iPads. She's also an Apple Distinguished Educator and an amazing Seesaw ambassador. So she has wonderful slides to share with us here today and exciting just real-world examples of what she has witnessed with using Seesaw with her college-level students and, of course, older students as well. So I'm passing the presentation over to her. So in a moment, we will be able to see her slides and her screen.
Wonderful.
Yay, looking good. Welcome, Sabba.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes, we're good to go. We're set.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to be able to share how we're using Seesaw at the higher education level, because one of the things that I'm constantly hearing from people is that, well, Seesaw is only for the little ones, and I'm so excited to really be able to share just how it is that we've been able to leverage this platform to have really been able to witness a remarkable difference in just the opportunities that our students have to be able to share their learning, not only with their peers, but really with a global audience as well. So one of the things, or one of the well, a little bit about me. I think you kind of got a little bit of an intro to me. I actually started off as a high school history teacher, and I taught high school history for about 10 years. And my sister actually was a student in this program. She was in the physician assistant program over at Keck USC. And through some of our projects and our work together, we actually the director of the program actually designed a brand new position because he began to see how important it was for students to be getting access to, the skills that students get when they're using technology in the classroom. And so I'm their director of innovative learning, and I work on two sides. I work with the faculty on sort of redesigning curriculum and just changing learning experiences for students, and I also work on the student side as well in helping our students develop just really sort of digital literacy skills and how to actually use technology. They're great at using it in a personal setting, but when it comes to sort of academic and professional ones, they just don't have a whole lot of experience. So I'm an Apple Distinguished Educator and absolutely delighted to be a Seesaw ambassador. So one of the biggest challenges that we face a lot of times at the higher education level is this sort of concept of the digital native. And a lot of professors sort of see this idea out there and think that, well, if a student is a digital native, it must mean that they're really tech savvy. After all, they have their devices out in front of them all the time, and they know how to use them, and I don't. And nothing really could be further from the truth, because one of the things that research has sort of shown us is this idea that digital natives may have the devices in their hands, but they really lack the literacy, the information seeking, and really the problem solving and critical thinking skills that are needed to be able to take advantage of what it is that they have in front of them. So the driving question that we ask at the University of Southern California in our program is, how might we assess students beyond the confines of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, while also being able to empower them with the mindset of a 21st century digital professional? Because after all, our students really sort of stand at a crossroads in higher ed. The world that they grew up in is completely different than the world that they're about to go out into. And so we want to make sure that this, time in the program is their opportunity to really get that skill set. And so for us, Seesaw has been really, really, really instrumental in this process. And one of the main reasons for that is that, a lot of our students, we could ask them, like, go on a website or go create a blog, or, put your information, on a, Squarespace platform or WordPress platform or something like that. And the reality is that that is a very, very scary thought for many older students. They just don't have the experience. They don't have the savvy oftentimes to actually be able to put the learning at the forefront and the technology sort of as that driving force behind it. A lot of them get very tangled up in, oh no, this is too hard to use, or what app is this, and how do I download this? And a lot of them just get very flustered oftentimes by the idea of even having to use technology in the classroom. And so Seesaw was unbelievably simplistic in nature, yet incredibly powerful with the opportunities that it provided for what it is our students could do. Another big benefit that we had is that this app was completely cross-platform, so students could be on it regardless of what their device that they were most comfortable with. We're a one-to-one iPad program, but some of our students are more comfortable on their MacBooks, some of our students are more comfortable using their phones, and so being able to give them that flexibility was incredibly powerful. So there's three sort of main areas that we're able to target in terms of teaching our students skills, and that is first and foremost getting the skill of learning to learn. One of the things that we really strive to do is move away from consumption of information and really create opportunities for students to create information in ways that make sense to them. And a lot of times they don't really get an opportunity to do this. They come to class, they're in a 4-hour lecture, 3-hour lecture, and it's just, you know, lecture, and there's no opportunity really to oftentimes process the information. So again, that's sort of like our first big area that we like to tackle. And then the other really big piece is how do we help students take these skills that they're learning in school and make them transitional to the real world. In a program, you know, whether it's an undergraduate program or a graduate program, students at the end of the day are looking for that degree and they are thinking about their job and how they're going to be paying back their loans, and we want to be able to give them that skill set to really put them at the forefront of all their other peers and everybody else that they're going to be competing with. So what Seesaw has been really nice for has been a nice private platform to be able to teach students skills about how to share information, about how to learn new ideas from their peers, but being able to do so in a safe space. It's difficult sometimes to take students directly onto Facebook or directly onto Twitter and have them just openly do things there. We want to be able to create a safe space for our students where they can make mistakes and they're not going to get in trouble for it, and that they can learn from it, so that when they do go into the real world and they are on platforms like LinkedIn and like Twitter and like Facebook, they really have the skill set to be able to effectively communicate. So the digital portfolio and the digital professionalism piece really sort of are the transition to the real world for our students. So the first area that I want to touch on a little bit is this idea of learning to learn. So a really big thing for our students, again, is bringing in more active learning into the classroom and providing them with those opportunities. And with the touch of a button, our students instantly have access to 6 different ways in which they can share what it is that they're learning. They can synthesize information in different ways that allow them so much choice in how to share information in a medium that makes sense to them. So we get to really move beyond just that piece of paper and be like, okay, how might we use images? How might we use audio? How might we use video to be able to share our knowledge with our peers? And the work that the students have submitted has just been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, as teachers on the back end, and I sit here and work with faculty, I mean, they're like jumping for joy when these posts are coming in, because the way in which our students are interacting is completely different. So we've sort of removed names here and whatnot, but this is what the post initially looked like. This is all these different types of formats. So we had students that will do notes and notability, and they'll upload PDFs that share their learning and how they've connected ideas. We then have students who will go to a whiteboard and they'll do diagrams and videos, and that's what you're seeing on the screen right now. It's a student who's just done all this work on a whiteboard and they're recording their thinking out loud. If you go to the next slide, what we see is a student who has done a drawing within Seesaw. So again, just this idea that our students have so much choice in how to share their learning, and a lot of them don't even know that this is a better way for them to learn. So a lot of them, you know, are used to sort of just pulling up Microsoft Word and just making like Word documents with all this information, but a lot of them don't always step outside and be like, oh, it might be better if I draw something. Oh, wow, I learned so much better when I record my ideas, or when I'm teaching my peers something, I tend to retain information in a much better manner. And so just giving them this opportunity to be able to explore these different creative sides has been really, I think, transformative for a lot of our students. I really like slide number 13, which is our next one, where a student takes a video link that she found on congestive heart failure, since this is the cardio module we're looking at, and she comments, "It's so helpful, it ties everything together. We've learned about heart failure and this moves much quicker than Khan Academy." So the idea that they're vetting information from the web and saying this is a stronger resource than this resource that you might commonly tend to go to is really sort of what we like to call building community in the cloud, and really strengthening them, like we said earlier, as digital professionals. What information do you share and how do you share information with your peers using social media? So Seesaw becomes, like I said, that safe place for them. So on our next slide, this is again just another student who did a drawing, and this is actually a story about club beta blockers, and then she does this whole video explaining her story. And our students, this is one thing that Seesaw has really empowered our students with, is the art of storytelling. How do you take information and turn it into this fun, memorable story that allows them to really retain information again on a stronger level? I really love the next slide. It shares a quote from a student. A lot of our students, like I said, did not grow up with these kinds of experiences and opportunities, and so this particular student shares how Seesaw's been amazing and it's a crucial part of her studying now. She says she uses it a few days before the exam to make sure that she's got all the major concepts down. And what's really nice about what happens in the feed, so say for example right now we're looking at the cardio module, they can go through the cardio module, and what's great about that is that they're able to see the same ideas presented, but in so many different ways. So again, they get to kind of appeal to what really works for them. On our next slide, we have a student, and I love giving this prompt to the students. It's, "I used to think, but now I think." And so the student said, "I used to think that Seesaw would be a waste of time, but now I realize I could never study without it." And so these are, again, just really sort of powerful experiences for our students. But the next slide is particularly powerful because in this one, you have the professor who's kind of sharing how she feels it's impacted her teaching and what the experience has been like for her. Again, for a lot of our faculty members, this is new for them as well. So she says, "Seesaw's been this amazing addition to my course," but I've kind of highlighted in blue how she points out that it went from just being this feed or just this blog and really blossomed because of how creative the students were becoming. The things that they were creating, the videos, the songs, all the ways in which they were just synthesizing learning and making it memorable for their peers has been something that now that they all kind of look forward to as they get to these different modules. So I did want to just quickly touch on these visible thinking routines. These are really powerful tools we've used to sort of complement Seesaw. So we'll give students one of these routines like Connect, Extend, Challenge, and then they get to go into the platform and really decide how they want to create the content to be able to share with their peers. So I have just a couple examples in here. There's another one, Think, Puzzle, Explore. And then one of the last ones that we use is the 3-2-1 bridge on the next slide. And so, yeah, those have been really powerful ways to have students, again, go beyond just doing written words and really finding new mediums that support them as learners. So next slide is, we found that folders have been really, really instrumental to our success. We kind of create a folder for every module or every activity that our students do. So they've got cardio, eyes, ears, nose, throat, EKGs, GI, pharm. So they get these different modules and then they'll put their posts in depending upon the module it is that they are in. But these folders have been super instrumental. We've also used Seesaw on our next slide as a really powerful tool for reflection. Again, this is another "I used to think, but now I think" prompt we used with our students. Guppy Tank is kind of like a Shark Tank activity we do. We use Seesaw a lot in our project-based learning courses, and this was one of them. And so, again, just really is an opportunity for students to reflect on things that are happening inside the classroom and then really comment on their peers' ideas as well and say, yeah, you know, I had that experience too. And the conversations kind of just really evolve into these amazing things. And this is the professor who leads, on the next slide, our project-based learning course. And she kind of says that, again, just being connected to the students' reflections and just kind of being a part of their self-guided learning journey has been one of the most priceless benefits to her. So lots and lots of different ways in which we've kind of leveraged it. We're kind of just scratching the surface right now at USC with what we see the potential potential being for Seesaw. But like I said on our next slide, moving into kind of like the last part of this, is this idea that yes, they're doing all of this in their courses and it's a nice safe space for them to do so, but ultimately we want to have them really select the pieces they're the most proud of to ultimately go into their digital portfolio, which they make public. And for our students, really what we kind of call this is find and be found. And what we tell them, if we go to the next slide, is this idea that the key to being found by organizations that you want to work for, the key to recruiters reaching out to you, the key to you just becoming a well-known professional in your field is by sharing your work. And so if we go to the next slide, the transition that we sort of like to see our students go from is being able to go from using Seesaw in school to using LinkedIn in the real world. And so one of the most powerful things I think any app or tool really gives us is, can you empower students with the skills they need to move from the classroom into the real world? And that's sort of the transition that we've used with our students. And on the next slide, this story, is one that we're particularly proud of. And this is one of our students who was a PA. And if you're not familiar with the physician assistant profession, it isn't one that's just all over the world. It really is something that's kind of unique to the United States, but is slowly expanding. And this is one of our graduates who was president of her class and was honor society and all that great stuff and was really excited about getting a job, and she ended up getting engaged to somebody living in the UK. And one of her biggest concerns was, am I going to be able to find a job in the UK? The PA is such a new profession. And she actually ended up landing a job at one of the top hospitals over there called Guy's in St. Thomas. And her advice to our incoming students is, use social media, learn how to use social media, create that digital portfolio using Twitter and using LinkedIn. And again, what's so powerful about Seesaw for our students is we give them the skills on how to effectively be great digital professionals on these social media platforms. So they're able to have this safe space in Seesaw and then translate it into the real world. And that digital professionalism piece on the next page, or the next slide, sorry, is really huge for our students, because at the end of the day, this is their world and this is what they're going to go into. And we want to be able to, we know that information is constantly changing. We know the importance and value, really sort of as educators being here today, we know the value of being able to learn from our peers in these social media environments. And so Seesaw has really given our students the skills on understanding how to do that successfully and the right things to do versus sometimes what can go wrong. So if we go to our next slide, like I said, the skills students really kind of learn the most by using Seesaw as a learning journal really translates into their ability to be these reflective practitioners of their craft who understand, and not just understand, but really value the idea of sharing work with a community of their peers. And on the next slide, I have just a very small example, again, from our project-based learning course, where our students were looking at mindfulness and the impact that that might have on students while they're in the program. And over here, they've kind of put up a little picture post, but you can just see how the discussion has evolved. And I couldn't even get the whole conversation into the image, but the conversations just go on and on and on. And it's, again, them having discussions about these bigger ideas. And you can definitely see how tomorrow that becomes a discussion on LinkedIn, or how that becomes a discussion on Twitter or Facebook or whatever platform it is that emerges. They, again, have the skill set to be able to go about these tasks. If you go to our next slide, you see over here, and again, one of our professors saying that, a lot of people sometimes when in higher ed, when we're looking at Seesaw, okay, well, am I going to have to spend a lot of time vetting all these posts? Am I going to have to sit here and kind of, go through all of them? But we found that approving these has not really been an issue at all. We do have moderation turned on in all of our Seesaw classes, but really what we've kind of found, or really what the professors have found, that the students are the ones that are driving the comments. The students are the ones that are driving the online Seesaw community, instead of the professor really having to do a lot of the legwork. So it's actually made things a little bit easier than it has harder. And on the last slide, kind of just wanted to end again with this idea that our students know from creating these experiences for them in school that they have a safe space that they can go to. So this was actually an email from one of our graduates asking, hey, is it okay to post this? So just the idea that they know that this is a safe place where they can come and ask questions is something that, makes me personally really proud. I love the middle one where she says, did you see my latest tweet? I used Canva to create it, and my mom thought it was professionally done. And this is, again, it goes back to sort of that idea of empowering our students as creators. A lot of our students, even though they're in higher ed, will go home and show their mom and dad and friends or significant others the work that they're doing because they're so proud of it. And Seesaw, like I said, has really been that really powerful transition in giving our students the skills and giving our students the opportunity, and just really in empowering our students to discover a side of themselves that I don't really think they knew existed in terms of learning and sharing information and the sharing of ideas. So it's been super, super transformative for us over at USC.
I love it. And Sabba, I wish we could talk to you for just hours and hours. I'm actually going to go back to the first slide so they see just your information. And maybe I'll go to the intro slide here. But people are just typing in a couple questions here. If you have any time to answer them, that would be great. So I personally just appreciate I think just the whole idea that you're bringing and sharing with everyone, you know, as you started off saying, so many people just think that Seesaw is for little ones, and it's, you know, very, you know, too simplistic for older students to use. And I love just your description throughout of how students aren't getting caught up in the tool. It's kind of paving their way to really have this interaction and really focus on the interactions and feedback and ways that they're showing their learning in multiple formats. So I love that. So
I'm actually not seeing the questions. Do you want to just read them
that's
to me?
okay. Yeah, I'll read the questions to you. That was my own feedback for you as I'm just, you know, so excited that you're here. Okay, so let's see, we have a question. So they're just saying, so voice and choice is pretty novel in higher ed compared to K-12. How have you worked to develop faculty to embrace this concept? As you know, healthcare education, including PA, is way too prescriptive and teacher-centered. So I guess they're wondering, like, how do you actually, obviously you've been very successful at using it, you know, in the program that you're working in. How do you get to that point? How do you change that mindset for professors?
So I would actually say that in higher ed, students don't have a lot of choice and voice in their learning. It's very, very prescriptive. It's very, you're going to turn in this paper, it's going to be this font, it's going to be this margin, it's going to be this, and that's the only way I'm going to accept it. One little thing is off and you're going to start missing a whole ton of points, because not only are you turning it in that way, you're being graded on how you turn it in that way. And so they actually don't have that opportunity oftentimes, at least sort of like in the environment where I was kind of coming from. But one of the things that's different for higher ed professors is that at the end of the day, they are incredibly passionate about a very niche topic. So they have an idea, they have something that they're really excited about, they're really passionate about. So this idea that they can spread it in so many different ways and that they can actually get their students excited about it is something that they get really excited about. And one of the things that I think in higher ed, they're generally, you know, across the board where people are struggling with is how do we get to higher levels of critical thinking? You know, how do we get to, you know, looking at different ways of assessing our students? There's a lot of, you know, yes, they're on their devices, but when we can look at, okay, we can hit higher levels of critical thinking, we can use this as a formative assessment tool, we can use this as a back channel, and we can use this as a way of getting students to share their learning with one another and use it sort of like as a test prep tool. That is very, very, very appealing. So anytime you can leverage devices, because the students are already on them. They've got it in front of them all the time throughout class. They're not going anywhere. And if you can kind of make it more of a partnership between the faculty and the students, that's really kind of like where the magic happens.
Awesome. So Allison wants to know, Sabba, what type of assignment would you recommend to a high school teacher who's interested in introducing Seesaw for the first time? So I guess this could go for high school or college level. If they're starting out, how would you approach maybe a first? Where would you start?
Yeah, so sometimes what we start is with all about me, because a lot of times, you know, in any of our classes, we get students that come in throughout the year. And so one of the first, this is actually something that we do, and something that I've done actually with some teachers and different professional development activities, is we do an all about me introduction. So the students get to introduce themselves in any medium of their choice. You can create a video about yourself, you can create a pic collage image showing different, you know, images from your life, or you can do a simple text note. You can do a text note and maybe even add an audio layer if you don't want to go the full video route. And so doing an all about me, I found has been really helpful. And then what's really nice about that, especially if it's a first day of class activity, as a professor or as a teacher, you get to go through the feed and learn about your students. But if you get a new student who comes into the class, they can jump into the all about me folder and they can go in and learn about all the different classmates who their peers are basically as well. So that's the one that I like to use, is that all about me. It's a sort of like very neutral, it's very content free, it's very stress free, and it's just a fun way to be able to express who you are.
Love that. So Chris is wondering a little bit about other platforms and integrating them with Seesaw. Specifically, he's talking about other creation platforms like Snapchat and whatnot. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that you actually mentioned Snapchat because, I'm a huge Snapchat lover as well. And one of the questions I keep getting asked is, well, how can I use Snapchat with my students? And we keep saying, don't use it with your students. Use platforms like Seesaw and have your students create Snapchat-like sort of videos or images and videos together, download it, and then upload into Seesaw. So kind of just having a little bit, I guess, like my thing is just having a little bit of empathy for, students' private spaces. So instead of having, saying like you're going to have to create a Snapchat account and you're going to have to upload it here, they can create anywhere they like. So like, in the first example that I showed, we had a student who created a Notability. We have students that create and explain everything. We have students that create in Book Creator, or they're creating in Google Docs, or they're creating all over the place, but again, they upload into our private space. And that's a big thing we like to emphasize for our students, is the importance of private spaces versus public spaces and what the difference is between the two.
Exactly. So Angelo has a question, just saying it's good to hear that one of the things Seesaw can teach is digital professionalism. How did you encourage and train students to be responsible for each post? Any strategies that could help, especially high school students?
Yeah, I can actually, I don't have that on me right now, but I can share we have sort of like a tips for commenting. We talk a lot to our students about digital etiquette, and not so much, we find that they're okay with the posts that they're putting up, they're good with that. Where we really emphasize a little bit more is in the commenting. So again, going back to our visible thinking routines, we use those all the time. So anytime we're asking students to do anything in Seesaw, I'd say 90% of the time we're pairing it with a visible thinking routine for a couple reasons. One, saves us time from coming up with the prompts. And number two, the level of critical thinking and just the inquiry that goes into it and working through those prompts, we found to be just really, really, really high quality. And one of the visible thinking routines we use for commenting is praise, question, polish. So it doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you just do praise and question. Sometimes you might just do question and polish. It's kind of up to you, but it's praise one thing about your peer's post, ask a question about something that they posted, and then last but not least, what's one thing they might be able to polish or improve upon.
And I think the other thing too that you mentioned a little bit in your presentation, but also in the blog post that I read that drew me to ask you to come here, was specifically about this idea of creating this community, this professional learning network, and getting students used to that framework too of reaching outside of themselves to really encompass kind of a learning community surrounding their learning, but also looking toward it as a professional, in the professional sense as well. So any other questions that you have for Sabba, type them in here quickly. Anything else that you want to add here today, Sabba, before we say goodbye?
I guess my big thing is, and this is again just the number one thing we've seen in our students, is that so many of our students just don't even know that they can learn in so many different ways. And Seesaw, just with a touch of a button, has really empowered them to explore tools like audio, explore tools like video in a medium in a simplistic way that they're just comfortable with. It's funny, Seesaw's simplicity is actually the key to its success in working with older students, because the fear that they have of technology it just disappears. And so they're so much more empowered to actually try a tool, versus if you take Explain Everything to a student for the first time in higher ed, they get so flustered. They get so flustered. But you give them Seesaw and all of a sudden now it's, oh, this is like Facebook, like, oh, this is like my Instagram. And that intuitiveness and that familiarity has been instrumental in being able to just bring this type of learning environment in for both our professors and for our students as well.
Love that. I love how they're learning. They're all learning along the way. So Sabba, thank you so much for coming, and thanks for everyone for sticking around with our technical issues. We'll get our recording cleaned up so that that goes out clean as well. But please make sure to reach out if you have additional questions. And Sabba, will you just share as well when you find it? Allison's asking for your commenting kind of prompts and etiquette. Maybe you can tweet that
Absolutely.
out and hashtag Seesaw chat, or
Absolutely.
that'd be perfect.
And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm more than happy to share examples with you or any of that kind of stuff.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for coming today, everyone.